The metal doors of the War Analysis Department slid open with a soft hiss. Senior Analyst Vexitar walked into the dimly lit room, his four eyes adjusting to the blue glow of the holographic displays. The smell of recycled air and electronic circuits filled his nostrils. Another day, another battle recording to study, but this one felt different. "Sir, you need to see this," called out Junior Analyst Colmis from across the room. Her tentacles danced nervously over the control panel. "The recording came in from Sector 7 Alpha. It's unusual." Vextar's primary eyes focused on the young analyst, while his secondary eyes continued scanning the room. In his 30 years of service to the Galactic Council, he had seen thousands of battle recordings, ships exploding in the cold vacuum of space, fleets clashing like metal storms, warriors dying for causes he barely understood. What could be so unusual about another skirmish? "Show me," he said, settling his bulk into the observation chair. The holographic display flickered to life. Space appeared before them, filled with 12 massive ships, hegemony vessels, their dark hulls bristling with weapons. Each ship was the size of a small city capable of destroying entire worlds. They moved in perfect formation, their engines glowing like angry red eyes. 12 capital ships, Colmis explained, her voice tight with tension. The hegemony's Iron Fist battle group. They were hunting human settlements in the Outer Rim. Vextar nodded. The hegemony was always hunting something. They had been at war with humanity for over 20 years now. The humans were tough fighters, but they usually needed large fleets to face even a small hegemony force. "Where are the human ships?" he asked. "That's just it, sir. There's only one." The display zoomed in, and Vextar's four eyes widened. A single ship hung in space near an asteroid field. It was small compared to the hegemony vessels, maybe 1/10 their size. The hull was painted in simple gray and blue colors. Human letters spelled out UES Taekwon along the side. One destroyer against 12 capital ships? Vexitar's voice carried disbelief. The humans have lost their minds. The recording began to play. The timestamp showed the battle had lasted exactly 47 minutes and 32 seconds. Vextar expected it to be over in less than 5 minutes. No single ship, no matter how well built, could face such odds and survive. He was wrong. The human destroyer moved like nothing Vextar had ever seen. It didn't charge forward in a desperate attack. It didn't try to run away. Instead, it danced. The ship twisted and spun through space, its engines firing in short bursts that sent it, weaving between the massive hegemony vessels. "Computer, analyze the human ship's movement patterns," Vextar commanded. "Analysis complete," the artificial voice replied. "The vessel is performing 17 different maneuvers that exceed recommended G-force limits. Crew survival probability, 0%, yet the ship kept moving, kept fighting. The first hegemony ship exploded 12 minutes into the battle. The human destroyer had somehow positioned itself behind the enemy vessel and fired a concentrated burst into the engine core. The explosion lit up the darkness like a dying star. "Impossible," whispered Colmis. "Look at the targeting data. Every shot hits exactly where it needs to. Not one wasted energy blast." Vexitar watched as the small human ship continued its deadly dance. It used the asteroid field like a weapon, leading hegemony ships into collisions with floating rocks. It made the enemy vessels shoot each other by positioning itself at just the right angle. Most amazingly, it seemed to predict where every enemy ship would be seconds before they moved. The second ship died when the human destroyer somehow made it ram into its own ally. The third ship exploded when the human led it straight into an asteroid the size of a moon. By the 20th minute, 4 hegemony capital ships were nothing but burning wreckage. "Who is commanding that ship?" Vextar demanded. Colmis's tentacles flew over her controls. "Records show the captain is one Han Minho, human male, age 38, standard military background, nothing special noted in our files." Nothing special. Vextar almost laughed at the words. He watched as Han Minho's destroyer performed a spinning maneuver that should have been impossible. The ship rotated on 3 different axes, while firing weapons in 4 directions. 3 more hegemony ships took critical damage. "Computer, calculate the precise movements needed to perform that last maneuver," Vextar ordered. "Calculation complete. The required timing precision is 0.0003 seconds. The probability of successful execution by standard crew training is less than 1%, yet it had worked perfectly. By the 30-minute mark, 8 of the 12 hegemony ships were destroyed. The remaining 4 had stopped attacking and were trying to retreat, but the human destroyer wouldn't let them leave. It chased them through the asteroid field like a predator hunting wounded prey. The final hegemony ship died when Han Minho somehow made it fly straight into the gravity well of a nearby planet. The massive vessel was crushed like an egg as it fell toward the surface. When the recording ended, the analysis room fell silent. Vextar stared at the display, his mind struggling to process what he had witnessed. In 47 minutes, one human had destroyed an entire battle group that should have been able to conquer a small star system. "Sir," Colmus said quietly, "should we report this to the High Command?" Vextar thought carefully. The Galactic Council had been trying to understand human military capabilities for decades. They knew humans were dangerous fighters, but this recording showed something beyond normal military skill. This showed artistry in destruction. This showed a level of combat ability that bordered on the supernatural. "Yes," he finally answered, "but mark it as priority alpha. The Council needs to understand how the humans are producing warriors like this Han Minho. If they have more like him—" He didn't finish the sentence. He didn't need to. If humanity had more warriors capable of such impossible feats, the balance of power in the galaxy could shift overnight. As Colmus prepared the report, Vextar watched the recording again. Each time he noticed new details. The way Han Minho's ship moved with perfect timing, the surgical precision of every weapon strike, the almost musical rhythm of the combat pattern. This wasn't just warfare, this was art. Deadly, beautiful, terrible art. And somewhere in human space, Dr. Park Sola was about to receive a very interesting request for information about a man named Han Minho. A request that would reveal truths that might shake the very foundations of galactic civilization. The hunt for understanding had begun, but the hunters had no idea they were tracking a legend. Dr. Park Sola sat in her small office at the Earth Military History Institute, surrounded by towers of old books and data tablets. The morning light filtered through dirty windows, casting long shadows across her desk. She had been working late, again researching forgotten battles and lost heroes for her next book. Her computer chimed with an incoming message. The seal of Galactic Command appeared on the screen, making her sit up straight. Messages from Galactic Command were rare for a simple military historian. "Priority request," the message began. "Need complete background information on Captain Han Minho, human male, currently commanding UES Taekwon. This is for routine diplomatic purposes. All information classified level 7. Please respond within 24 hours. Sola stared at the screen, her coffee cup forgotten in her hand. Han Minho. The name hit her like a cold wind. She hadn't heard that name spoken aloud in 15 years. Most people believed he was dead. With shaking fingers, she typed the name into her personal research database. The screen filled with files marked classified and eyes only. Pictures appeared of a young man with serious dark eyes and a quiet smile. Captain Han Minho, age 23 in the oldest photo, the ghost of Kepler Station, the phantom of Proxima Gate. The man who had become legend. Sola's hands trembled as she opened the first file. Even after all these years, reading about Han Minho made her heart race. She had written her master's thesis about him, back when his story was still classified above her security level. She had spent years gathering rumors, whispers, and fragments of truth. The first record was from Kepler Station, a mining outpost on the edge of human space. 23 years ago, when Han Minho was just a lieutenant commanding a simple patrol frigate called Guardian's Rest. The station housed 50,000 miners and their families. It should have been safe, protected, by a defense grid and early warning systems. But the Zelon Empire had other plans. They came in the night with a fleet of 40 warships, expecting easy conquest. The defense grid fell in the first hour. The evacuation ships were destroyed as they tried to flee. By all rights, it should have been a massacre. Then Lieutenant Han Minho arrived. His frigate was old and barely armed, built for patrol work, not war. Against 40 enemy ships, he should have died in the first minute. Instead, he held them off for 6 days, Sola read the combat reports, still amazed after all these years. Han Minho had used the asteroid field around Kepler Station like a maze, leading enemy ships into traps and ambushes. He made them crash into each other. He used their own weapons against them. Most incredibly, he kept them so busy chasing his lone ship that they couldn't attack the station. For 6 days, one man in one small ship held off an entire invasion fleet. When human reinforcements finally arrived, they found 37 Zelon ships destroyed and the rest fleeing in terror. The Guardian's Rest was barely holding together, its hull burned and twisted, but still fighting. Lieutenant Han Minho had saved 50,000 lives with nothing but skill, determination, and an understanding of combat that seemed almost magical. But that was just the beginning. Sola opened the next file, the Battle of Proxima Gate 15 years ago. By then, Han Minho had earned the rank of captain and commanded a small battle group. The hegemony was pushing deep into human territory, threatening to cut off 3 entire star systems. 1 million colonists were trapped behind enemy lines. The mission was simple: hold Proxima Gate long enough for the civilians to evacuate. The enemy force was overwhelming, 60 ships against Han Minho's 8. Military command expected his battle group to buy maybe 2 hours. Han Minho held the gate for 18 hours. Sola pulled up the tactical recordings, her eyes wide as she watched the impossible unfold again. Han Minho didn't just fight, he orchestrated destruction like a composer writing music. His ships moved in perfect harmony, each vessel playing its part in a deadly symphony. He created the Phantom Protocol during that battle, a fighting technique that no other human commander had been able to master. Ships would appear to be in one place, then suddenly strike from another angle. The enemy never knew where the next attack would come from. When the evacuation was complete, Han Minho's battle group had been reduced to just his flagship. Still, he fought on, giving the refugee ships time to reach safety. The final recording showed his ship, Eternal Duty, diving straight into the center of the enemy formation before the signal cut out. The official report listed Captain Han Minho as missing in action, presumed dead. The galaxy mourned the loss of its greatest military genius. Statues were built, songs were written, children learned his name in school. But Sola knew the truth. She had sources in deep space, smugglers and traders who whispered stories in dark bars, stories of a ghost ship that appeared when things looked hopeless. Stories of impossible rescues and enemy fleets found drifting empty in space. The ghost of Kepler Station hadn't died at Proxima Gate. He had simply become a legend that moved in the shadows, protecting humanity from threats they never even knew existed. Now, apparently, the ghost had returned. Sola's hands moved quickly over her keyboard as she composed her response to Galactic Command. But she couldn't tell them everything. Some truths were too dangerous. If the galaxy knew that Han Minho was still alive, still fighting, the balance of power could shift overnight. Every species would want him as an ally or fear him as an enemy. Instead, she wrote a careful report. She mentioned his early career, his tactical innovations, his tragic death at Proxima Gate. She painted him as a skilled but ultimately human commander who had paid the ultimate price for his heroism. But as she typed, Sola's mind raced with darker thoughts. Why had Han Minho revealed himself now? Why risk exposure after 15 years of hiding? Something big was coming, something that required the return of humanity's greatest warrior. Far from Earth, in the command center of the Galactic Council, senior analyst Vextar was reading preliminary reports about Han Minho's past. The more he read, the more disturbed he became. This wasn't just a skilled captain. This was a warrior who had redefined what was possible in space combat. Colmus, he called to his assistant. Run a deep scan of all battle recordings from the last 15 years. Look for any unexplained victories, any fights where the outcome defied military logic. As the computer began its search, Vextar felt a chill run through his alien physiology. If Han Minho was still alive, still active, then humanity possessed a weapon more dangerous than any fleet. They possessed a living legend, and somewhere in the darkness between stars, aboard a ship called UES Taekwon, Han Minho read an encrypted message from Earth. The hegemony was mobilizing their grand fleet. 300 ships, all converging on human space. The message ended with words that made the legendary warrior smile grimly. "The galaxy needs its ghost again." Han Minho's hands moved over his ship's controls. The hunt was about to begin, and this time, the prey was bigger than anything he had faced before, but legends weren't made by playing it safe. It was time to remind the galaxy why some names were spoken only in whispers. Commander Yoon Ji-won stood on the bridge of the defense station orbiting New Seoul, watching the evacuation ship struggle to lift off from the planet below. 2 million civilians needed to escape before the hegemony arrived. 2 million men, women, and children who had made their homes on this peaceful world, never expecting war to find them. The tactical display showed the grim reality. 40 hegemony ships were 3 hours away from the system. Ji-won had 6 aging cruisers and a handful of patrol boats to protect the evacuation. It wasn't enough. It wasn't even close to enough. "Commander," called Lieutenant Kim Do-hyun from the communications station. "The transport ships are reporting mechanical problems. Half of them weren't designed for this kind of mass evacuation. They're overloaded and struggling to reach escape velocity." Ji-won closed her eyes and tried not to think about the families packed into those struggling ships. Children crying for their parents. Old people confused about why they had to leave their homes. Young couples holding each other as they fled toward an uncertain future. "How many people are still on the surface?" she asked. 1.7 million, Do-hyun replied quietly. "At current evacuation rate, we need at least 6 more hours." 6 hours! The hegemony would be here in 3. "Signal all defense ships," Ji-won ordered. "We're going to buy as much time as possible, even if it costs us everything." Her small fleet began moving into defensive positions near the planet's gravity well. The plan was simple and desperate. Make the hegemony fight for every meter of space. Hope that the enemy would be cautious enough to give the evacuation more time. It was a plan that would end with all of them dead. Then the impossible happened. "Commander!" Do-hyun's voice cracked with excitement. "Ship dropping out of hyperspace at the edge of the system." The main display showed a single vessel emerging from the swirling portal of folded space. It was a human destroyer, smaller than any of Ji-won's cruisers. The hull was battle-scarred, showing signs of recent combat. Weapon ports glowed with ready energy. "They're transmitting," Do-hyun reported. "Put it through." The voice that came through the speakers was calm, steady, and carried the weight of absolute authority. "New Seoul Defense Force, this is Han Minho aboard UES Taekwon. I'm here to buy you time." The bridge fell silent. Every officer, every crew member stared at the speakers as if they couldn't believe what they had heard. Han Minho, the ghost of Kepler Station, the legend who had died at Proxima Gate 15 years ago. "Impossible," whispered Lieutenant Park, Sunho at the sensor station. "Han Minho is dead. Everyone knows that." But the destroyer on their screens was real. And somehow, impossibly, the greatest military mind in human history was offering to help them. "Han Minho," Ji-won said carefully. "This is Commander Yoon Ji-won. We have 2 million civilians to evacuate and 40 enemy ships incoming. Even you can't face those odds alone." A sound came through the speakers that might have been laughter. "Commander, I've been facing impossible odds for 15 years. Trust me when I say that legends don't stay dead when their people need them." Far from New Seoul, in the secure monitoring station of the Galactic Council, senior analyst Vexitar watched the real-time feed with growing alarm. They had been tracking hegemony movements for weeks, expecting another routine conquest of a human world. Now they were witnessing something unprecedented. "Colmus, are you recording everything?" he demanded. "Yes, sir. Full spectrum analysis is running." Her tentacles danced nervously over the controls. "Sir, the human ship's energy signatures are strange. It's like the vessel is operating beyond its design specifications." Vexitar studied the readings. The destroyer UES Taekwon was showing power outputs that should have been impossible for a ship of its class. Weapon systems were cycling at rates that should have caused catastrophic overloads. The engines were producing thrust levels that defied physics. "Computer," he called out, "analyze the human ship's current capabilities compared to standard destroyer specifications." "Analysis complete," the artificial voice responded. "Current performance exceeds design parameters by an average of 43% across all systems. This level of enhancement should result in critical system failure within minutes. Yet the ship continued to function perfectly. Back at New Seoul, the hegemony fleet had arrived. 40 massive warships dropped out of hyperspace in perfect formation, their hulls black against the stars. Each ship was 5 times larger than Han Minho's destroyer. Together, they carried enough firepower to reduce the planet below to ash. War Master. Kethral commanded the fleet from his flagship, Iron Dominion. He had been hunting humans for 20 years, and he knew their tactics. They would cluster around their evacuation ships, trying to create a defensive perimeter. It would take perhaps an hour to crush their resistance and begin the slaughter of the civilians below. All ships, Kethral commanded, assume attack formation. Destroy the defense fleet, then target the evacuation ships. Leave no survivors. The hegemony fleet began its advance, weapons powering up, shields at maximum strength. It should have been the beginning of a massacre. Instead, it became the opening movement of a symphony of destruction. Han Minho's destroyer moved first. It didn't charge forward or try to hide. Instead, it accelerated toward the center of the enemy formation at a speed that should have liquefied its crew. The ship twisted and spun as it flew, performing maneuvers that violated every rule of space combat. Target the human ship, Kethral ordered. All vessels concentrate fire. 40 ships turned their weapons on the lone destroyer. Energy beams and missile volleys filled the space around UES Taekwon with deadly light. But the human ship wasn't where the targeting computers said it should be. It slipped between the attacks like smoke, never quite where the enemy expected. The first hegemony ship died when Han Minho somehow positioned his destroyer behind it during a spinning maneuver that should have been impossible. A concentrated burst of weapons fire punched through the enemy's rear shields, detonating the main reactor. The explosion lit up the darkness like a newborn star. "How did he get behind us?" Kethral demanded. His tactical officer's face was pale, with confusion. "I don't know, sir. Our sensors show he was in front of us, then suddenly he was behind the Black Thunder. It's like he teleported." But Han Minho wasn't using teleportation or advanced technology. He was using pure skill, experience, and an understanding of space combat that had been refined through decades of impossible battles. Every move was calculated 3 steps ahead. Every maneuver served multiple purposes. The second hegemony ship died when Han Minho led it into the debris field of the first explosion. The third fell victim to its own allies' weapons when the destroyer positioned itself so that missed shots struck the wrong target. In the Galactic Council monitoring station, Vexitar watched with growing horror. The tactical display showed maneuvers that shouldn't exist, weapon strikes with impossible precision, and a level of combat artistry that defied explanation. "Colmiss, how many impossible maneuvers have we recorded so far?" 17, sir, and that's just in the first 12 minutes of combat. By the 20-minute mark, 6 hegemony ships were destroyed, and 3 others were badly damaged. The remaining enemy vessels had stopped their advance and were trying to regroup. But Han Minho wasn't giving them time to think. His destroyer wove through their formation like a needle through cloth, striking vital targets and vanishing before return fire could find him. He used the enemy's own size against them, making the massive ships crash into each other as they tried to track his movements. On the bridge of UES Taekwon, Han Minho worked with calm precision. His hands moved over the controls like a pianist, playing a familiar song. Every system on his ship was pushed beyond its limits, held together by skill, experience, and perhaps a touch of the impossible. This wasn't just warfare. This was art. Deadly, beautiful, terrible art. And in the evacuation ships below, 2 million civilians watched the impossible unfold above them. One man, in one ship, was holding off an entire enemy fleet. Children pointed at the dancing lights in space. Adults wept with relief and wonder. The ghost of Kepler Station had returned, and he was everything the legends said he was. But even legends had limits, and Han Minho knew that his greatest challenge was still ahead. The UES Taekwon limped through space, its hull glowing red from weapon impacts and reactor strain. Sparks flew from damaged control panels on the bridge, and the air recycling system struggled to clear the smoke from overloaded circuits. Han Minho's legendary destroyer had been pushed beyond all limits, held together now by determination and desperate engineering. 26 hegemony ships lay dead in space behind them. twisted metal monuments to impossible combat skill. But the cost had been severe. The Type 1's main weapons were offline, its shields were failing, and the engines were running at barely 30% capacity. "Sir," called Chief Engineer Lee Aaron from her station, her voice tight with exhaustion. "I can give you maybe 10 more minutes before the reactor goes critical. After that..." She didn't need to finish. Han Minho studied the tactical display with calm eyes. The evacuation was 90% complete. 1.8 million civilians were safely aboard transport, ships accelerating toward the edge of the system. 200,000 people remained on New Sol's surface, loading onto the final wave of evacuation vessels. They needed 30 more minutes. "All evacuation ships," Han Minho transmitted on the emergency frequency. "This is your final warning. You have 20 minutes to clear the gravity well before I can no longer protect you." Commander Yoon Ji-won's voice crackled back through the static. "Han Minho, your ship is barely functional. Get out of there while you still can." "Negative, Commander. Legends don't run when people need them." As if summoned by his words, space itself began to tear open at the edge of the system. Massive hyperspace portals swirled into existence, and from them emerged the nightmare that had haunted human space for months. The Hegemony Grand Fleet. 300 ships, every class of vessel the Hegemony had ever built, dreadnoughts the size of cities, battlecruisers bristling with enough weapons to destroy planets, fast attack ships that moved like deadly insects. The largest military force ever assembled by the Hegemony war machine. Supreme War Master Vokhtar commanded from the bridge of his flagship, Universe Eater, a dreadnought so massive that it generated its own gravity field. He had come personally to deal with the human who had humiliated his forces twice. This time, there would be no escape, no impossible victory. "All ships," Vokhtar's voice boomed across the fleet channels. "Deploy in full battle formation. I want that human ship crushed." Slowly, make him watch as we destroy every evacuation vessel before we finish him. 300 ships began moving into attack positions, their combined mass blotting out entire star fields. The tactical displays of watching alien observers registered energy readings that could sterilize solar systems. In the Galactic Council monitoring station, Senior Analyst Vexitar felt something like panic creeping into his alien mind. "Computer, analyze the current force disparity." Analysis complete. Hegemony force advantage is 3,000 to 1 in ship count, 15,000 to 1 in total firepower. Probability of human survival, 0%. But Vexitar had learned not to trust probability when it came to Han Minho. Aboard the dying UES Taekwon, Han Minho opened a communication channel that reached across all frequencies, to every ship, every station, every listening post in the sector. When he spoke, his voice carried the weight of legends and the finality of last words. To any human vessel receiving this transmission, remember that legends never die. They just wait for the right moment to return. Tell them the ghost kept his promise. On Earth, in the Deep Space Monitoring Center, Lieutenant Kim Do-yeon leaned forward in his chair as he received the transmission. Around him, veteran officers who had served during the old wars felt tears in their eyes. They knew what they were hearing, the final message of humanity's greatest warrior. But Han Minho wasn't finished. "To the Hegemony fleet," his voice continued, "now hard as stellar ice. You want to see what a legend can do? Let me show you why humans don't just fight to win. We fight to ensure our legends live forever." The UES Taekwon began to move. What happened next would be analyzed by military strategists for centuries. A single damaged destroyer, its weapons, nearly dead and its engines failing, began one of the most impossible combat displays in recorded history. Han Minho used the gravity of New Sol's moon to slingshot his ship into the heart of the enemy formation. As he flew, he fired his last functional weapons at passing asteroids, turning them into high-velocity projectiles that crashed into enemy ships like cosmic bullets. The first dreadnought died when Han Minho somehow made it collide with its own escort vessels. The second fell when he used the explosion of the first to mask his approach, delivering a precisely targeted strike to its command center. "Impossible!" Vokhtar screamed from his bridge. "How is one ship doing this?" His tactical officer's voice shook with disbelief. "Sir, he's using our own fleet against us. Every ship he destroys becomes a weapon against the others." The debris fields, the explosions, the radiation clouds. He's turning all of it into tactical advantages. 20 minutes into the battle, 47 hegemony ships were destroyed or crippled. Han Minho had turned the asteroid field around New Sol into a maze of death, leading entire squadrons into collisions and crossfire scenarios. He made the enemy's overwhelming numbers work against them, creating traffic jams in space that ended in catastrophic explosions. But even legends have limits. The UES Taekwon was dying around him. Atmosphere was bleeding out through hull breaches. The artificial gravity had failed, leaving the crew working in zero-G emergency suits. Warning alarms screamed constantly as system after system went critical. "Sir," Engineer Lee Aaron reported, her voice barely audible over the chaos. "Reactor. Containment is at 14%. We have maybe 5 minutes before—" "I know," Han Minho replied calmly. "Are the evacuation ships clear?" "Yes, sir. The last transport just reached minimum safe distance." Han Minho nodded and began inputting commands into his navigation computer. The ship's AI, damaged but still functional, recognized the course he was plotting. "Warning," the computer said in its calm, electronic voice. "Current heading will result in collision with enemy flagship. Crew survival probability, 0%. "Understood," Han Minho said quietly. Then to his crew, "All hands, this is the captain. It has been my honor to serve with you. Prepare for ram speed." The UES Taekwon accelerated toward the massive Universe Eater at maximum velocity. Every remaining erg of power from the dying reactor was channeled into the engines. The ship moved faster than it had ever been designed to go, its hull beginning to glow white-hot from the friction with space dust. Vaktar watched the approaching destroyer with something between admiration and terror. "All ships, stop that vessel! Concentrate all fire!" Hundreds of weapons turned on the UES Taekwon, but Han Minho had saved one last impossible maneuver. The destroyer twisted through the weapon fire like a dancer, its hull taking dozens of hits, but never quite receiving the direct strike that would stop its final charge. In the Galactic Council monitoring station, Vextar watched the tactical display with fascination and horror. "Computer, calculate the impact energy if that destroyer hits the hegemony flagship at current velocity." Calculation complete. Impact energy will be equivalent to a small star going nova. Destruction radius will encompass approximately 40% of the hegemony fleet. The collision lit up the New Sol system like a second sun. The Universe Eater, massive as it was, simply vanished in the explosion. The shockwave tore through space, destroying everything within a 50-kilometer radius and crippling dozens of other ships. When the light faded, 2/3 of the hegemony Grand Fleet was either destroyed or too damaged to fight. The survivors scattered in panic, jumping to hyperspace without waiting for orders. The battle was over. The legend was complete. In the evacuation ships, 2 million civilians watched the explosion fade into memory. Children asked their parents about the bright light in space. Adults wept for the hero who had given everything to save them. And in monitoring stations across the galaxy, alien observers began to understand a fundamental truth about humanity. They didn't just produce skilled warriors. They created legends, and legends once born never truly died. The ghost of Kepler Station had kept his final promise. He had reminded the universe why some names were spoken only in whispers of awe and terror. But even in death, Han Minho's legend was just beginning to grow. 6 months had passed since the Battle of New Sol. In the sterile halls of the Galactic Council War Analysis Department, senior analyst Vexatar sat before a mountain of reports, data files, and combat recordings. His 4 eyes were tired from months of analysis, but his mind buzzed with the weight of discovery. The final report lay open before him. The Han Minho Phenomenon, a study in human military exceptionalism. 300 pages of analysis, backed by testimony from dozens of alien military experts and combat veterans. It was the most important document the department had ever produced. "Colmus," he called to his assistant, "are the High Command representatives ready for the briefing?" "Yes, sir. Director Thelmos is here, along with the military advisors from 7 different species. They're all waiting in Conference Room Alpha." Vextar gathered his materials and walked toward the conference room. His claws clicked against the metal floor as he prepared to deliver findings that would change how the galaxy viewed humanity forever. The conference room was filled with the most powerful military minds in known space. Director Thelmos, an ancient being whose species had been waging war for millennia, sat at the head of the table. Around him were generals, admirals, and war chiefs from every major civilization. "Analysts," Thelmos began, his voice carrying the weight of authority. "You have spent 6 months studying the human called Han Minho. What have you learned?" Vextar activated the holographic display. The image of the UES Taekwon appeared, frozen in the moment before its final charge into the hegemony flagship. Even as a still image, the destroyer seemed to radiate dangerous purpose. "Directors, what we discovered goes far beyond the capabilities of a single warrior," Vextar began. "We weren't just analyzing battle footage, we were witnessing mythology in action." The display shifted to show combat statistics. Impossible maneuvers, precision targeting data, reaction times that defied biological limits. The numbers painted a picture of abilities that bordered on the supernatural. "Han Minho wasn't just a skilled captain," Vextar continued. "He was humanity's avatar of war, their living embodiment of the warrior spirit. In studying him, we have learned something terrifying about the human species." General Morkes of the hegemony survivors leaned forward. His people had lost 2 entire fleets to this one human. "What exactly are you saying, analyst?" "I'm saying that humans possess a quality we don't fully understand. They can take ordinary individuals and transform them into living legends whose mere presence alters the balance of entire conflicts." The display showed a timeline of Han Minho's career, from young lieutenant at Kepler Station to the ghost who held Proxima Gate to his final stand at New Sol. Each battle showed the same pattern. Impossible odds overcome through a combination of skill, determination, and something that couldn't be measured or quantified. "Computer," Vextar commanded, "display the tactical analysis of the New Sol engagement." The hologram filled with the detailed breakdown of the 40-minute battle. 300 enemy ships reduced to scattered survivors by 1 dying destroyer. Maneuvers that violated the laws of physics, precision that defied explanation. In those 40 minutes, Vextar explained, Han Minho performed 63 separate impossible maneuvers. He turned the enemy's overwhelming numbers against them. He used the environment as a weapon. Most importantly, he demonstrated that human legends are not bound by normal limitations. Admiral Zekthon of the Korthak Empire shifted uncomfortably. "Are you suggesting that this Han Minho was somehow superhuman?" "No," Vextar replied. "That's what makes this so remarkable. Medical scans from his early career show he was completely ordinary by human standards. Average reflexes, normal intelligence, typical physical capabilities. What made him extraordinary was training, experience, and an indefinable quality that humans call heart." The room fell silent as the implications sank in. If humans could create one Han Minho from ordinary materials, they could potentially create others. Director Thelmos spoke carefully. "What are your recommendations, analyst?" Vexitar's response would echo through galactic politics for decades. Immediate peace negotiations with humanity. If they can produce one Han Minho, we must assume they have others waiting in the shadows. The risk of continued hostility is too great. On Earth, in the gleaming halls of the Fleet Academy, Admiral Park Sun-ho reviewed applications for the new Ghost Protocol training program. The project was classified at the highest levels, designed to study and replicate the combat methods that had made Han Minho legendary. Among the files was one that made him pause. Ensign Lee Arin, formerly chief engineer of the UES Taekwon. She had survived the evacuation before the final battle, one of the few who had worked directly with the legend himself. Her simulation scores were remarkable, not quite matching Han Minho's impossible records, but close enough to suggest potential. "Dr. Kim," he called to his aide, "what do you think of this candidate?" Dr. Kim Sola, formerly Dr. Park Sola before her marriage, looked over the file. She had written the definitive biography of Han Minho after his death, and now served as the primary consultant for the Ghost Protocol program. "She learned from the best," Sola said quietly. "Engineer Aaron was with him during those final months when he was operating alone in deep space. If anyone absorbed his methods, his way of thinking, it would be her. Admiral Park nodded. Approved. For advanced training. We need to understand what made Han Minho possible, and then we need to make sure humanity never lacks such protectors. Across the galaxy, in the depths of space where no charts marked safe passage, strange things began to be reported. Deep space monitoring stations detected signals that shouldn't exist. Transmissions in human military codes from coordinates where no ships were supposed to be. Captain Yoon Ji-won, now commanding the new battlecruiser New Seoul's Defender, received one such transmission during a routine patrol. The message was brief, encrypted in codes that officially didn't exist anymore. All stations, this is Ghost Actual. The watch continues. Legends never die. The transmission cut off before triangulation was possible, leaving only questions. But throughout human space, veterans of the old wars smiled grimly. They knew what the message meant. Somewhere in the darkness between stars, the spirit of Han Minho lived on. In the years that followed, dozens of unexplained incidents occurred. Pirate fleets found drifting empty in space, hostile alien scouts disappearing without trace, distress calls from remote colonies suddenly going silent. But when rescue ships arrived, they found the colonists safe and the attackers gone. Each incident bore the hallmarks of impossible combat skill and surgical precision. Military analysts called them ghost encounters, though officially no one would admit to believing in such things. The hegemony, what remained of it, withdrew to their core systems and signed a permanent peace treaty with humanity. They claimed it was for economic reasons, but their military leaders whispered the truth in private. They had faced a legend and survived only because he had chosen to let them live. The Galactic Council restructured their entire military doctrine around a single principle. Never underestimate a species that could forge ordinary people into immortal myths. Human military advisors were suddenly in high demand, not for their technology or tactics, but for their understanding of how to create warriors who transcended normal limitations. But perhaps the most important change came in the nurseries and schools of human colonies throughout the galaxy. Children learned new stories at bedtime. Tales of the ghost of Kepler Station, the phantom of Proxima Gate, the legend of New Seoul. They learned that heroes could come from anywhere, that ordinary people could become extraordinary when others needed them. And in the deepest archives of human military intelligence, a single file remained classified above all others. It contained reports from deep space traders, smugglers, who claimed to have seen a ship matching the UES Taekwon still patrolling the void. Impossible sightings of a vessel that had been destroyed in front of millions of witnesses. The file was marked with a simple notation. Some legends are too powerful for death itself to claim. Whether Han Minho truly survived his final battle, or whether his legend had taken on a life of its own, one thing was certain. The galaxy had learned a valuable lesson. Humanity's greatest strength wasn't their technology, their numbers, or their resources. It was their ability to create legends that lived forever in the hearts of those who needed hope. And as long as humans existed, as long as they told stories of impossible heroes and miraculous victories, the ghost of Kepler Station would continue to patrol the darkness, ensuring that legends never truly die. In the end, that was Han Minho's greatest victory. He had become more than a man, more than a warrior, more than a legend. He had become proof that some spirits are too determined, too noble, and too necessary to ever truly fade away. The watch continued, the legend lived on, and somewhere in the vastness of space, impossible things still happened when hope seemed lost and heroes were needed most.